Hello, my friends. It's Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and here I am, Kardec Radio, bringing to you Spiritism, a closer look. I'm your host, Luiz Lima, and tonight's program, we are going to take a closer look at good and evil. It's one of the good and evil, it's one of these difficult things for us to understand whether we are spiritists or not. It's complicated. There's a lot of it seems to us, most people have the perception there's too many things to consider, and it's hard to kind of come up with a black and white explanation. This is what it is. This is good. This is evil. Period. It's really not like that. We wanted to take a closer look at good and evil from, of course, the Spiritist point of view, see what we can bring to you. And like always, we encourage you to make your comments, post your questions, if you will, suggestions, and anything along those lines. Well, good and evil, it's relatively difficult to most people to grasp the meaning. When we see something that we consider evil, we usually tend to rebel, and we usually tend to kind of shut down, and we don't understand it, and we kind of shut down. And for other people, what for us sometimes, or what for you might look evil, might not look evil at all for other people. So that in itself establishes we are not using the same criteria. There's a problem with the reference. There's a moving reference somewhere. And I think we need to bring this to the table here for discussion exactly with that intent. How can we see this in a more tangible way that becomes, this is evil, this is not evil, this is good, and so on and so on and so on. So there's a lot of different opinions and definitions, and in the Spiritist literature, actually, we will see things like evil is the lack of good. That's one thing. It's a very popular way of defining evil. So people ask, what is evil? Oh, evil is the lack of good. It's a way of seeing it. There's another way of seeing it, which is also very popular. What is evil? And Spiritists would say evil is the ignorance about what's good, which is also, very, very, very commented throughout the Spiritist world. So we want to take a look at this because every time we define something based on its opposing side, you're really not defining it. It's like life and death. You can define death as, all the organs cease, nothing is working. What is life? It's when they are up and running. Those are not, these are relative definitions. You pick one side and you define the opposing side, if you will, as a duality process. We don't want to do this because things become cloudy, and we want to have a more, I would say, in-depth study and explanation of all of this. So, good and evil. I think I'm going to give you some graphic, visual information here so we can start talking about it. So I'm going to bring what we call the Spiritist hierarchy. What is that? When codifier Allan Kardec was writing Spiritism, was writing the first book, what became the first book, okay, the Spirit's book, he felt the need, as a person, as a writer, he felt the need to categorize the spirits according to their level of advancement. He thought it was going to be easier if he can refer to some more advanced spirits with certain words and less advanced spirits with other words. So he came up with the idea to classify, to categorize spirits, again, based on their moral advancement, in 10 categories. So, which are the ones you see here. The least advanced one, impure, in the bottom of your screen. The most advanced one, pure spirits. at the top. So he comes with these ideas, and he actually asks the spirits, "Can I do this?" And the spirits will say, "Well, you can do as many categories as you want. You can put the names that you want, as long as the teachings are preserved. That's okay." So he comes up and uses these 10 names for the 10 categories he created. And then he goes one step further. He groups these categories. So the first five in the bottom, he calls the third order or imperfect spirits. And the reason why he calls imperfect, he will explain at length. This is in the Spirit's book, by the way, starting with question 100. So I encourage you to take a look at it and read it. But he will explain to us. This is a brief explanation. The book is a lot deeper. Imperfect spirits are subject to the predominance of matter over spirit. They are more prone to material things, a lot more prone to material things and material life than spiritual life. There's a tremendous propensity for evil, for doing, bad things and repeating those things, and just without having the knowledge that we could do better in a lot of cases. So there's ignorance. There's, as you see here on the screen, there's a really vague intuition about what God means and is, but there's not really an understanding. There's no comprehension. There's no full understanding of it. It's like an idea, a vague idea, I would say. So this categorizes third order spirits, imperfect spirits. These spirits live in worlds such as Earth. So Earth is a housing place for third order spirits. Most of us here are third order spirits. Eventually, we find one of those, above the third order. The next order above it, which gets the next four categories, as you see here, Allan Kardec called the second order or good spirits. And that's a whole different story. There's no longer there's a predominance of matter over spirits, the other way around. Material life for these spirits is not as challenging and have not the same importance as spiritual life. So spiritual life is the focus of attention for second order spirits, good spirits. There is no propensity for evil whatsoever. It's the other way around. Desire to do good all the time, as much as you can, with the most possible intensity that you can. Those are second order spirits. At times, we here on earth have one of those spirits incarnating. There's not many of them, but there are some. Throughout history, we have several cases like this. So we have Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Chico Xavier in Brazil, also in Brazil, Divaldo Franco, and it goes on and on. But they are not the majority at all here on earth. And then there's the first order spirits, which are called pure spirits. Those are no longer subjected to the influence of matter because they do not need to reincarnate anymore. They have achieved a level of advancement that no longer requires them to incarnate for purification or anything along those lines. When they incarnate, when they reincarnate, it's only as a mission by choice. Okay, so we have this. Above all of these 10 categories, above all, there's God. So when we start talking about, looking at this picture here, when we start talking about good and evil, usually, not necessarily, but the great majority of us starts talking about coming from the bottom. Evil, not so evil, we use to discuss and understand the idea of good and evil, we use the least of the references. We use the impure spirits. Those were the cavemen, whatever you want to call, and those were really bad spirits. We did a lot of wrong things in the past, and so we use a reference that's on the bottom of the scale. maybe that's where the trouble becomes. We should not reference to the bottom of the scale. We should reference to the top of the scale for two reasons. First of all, if we use a reference of something in the bottom of the scale, and let's just say, just to get an example, so looking at the bottom of the scale, I'm going to compare myself, let's just say, to impure spirits. And I look back and I see, oh, okay, I understand what impure spirits are. They're really bad and so and so. I'm much better than they are. Well, that's my self-evaluation of myself. I don't need necessarily to say I'm at this particular level or that level, but just the fact that I consider myself a lot better than they are, that kind of, puts me at ease. So I don't have to do a lot. I'm okay. I'm good. I'm much better than they are. There's people that are worse than I am. So I'm good. I'm happy with that. I'm satisfied. I'm not going to put any effort on that. That's one of the problems of using the bottom of the scale. The second problem in using the bottom of the scale is, how do I know what my possibilities are if I don't look up to the top of the scale? How would I know how far I can go, how far I can grow, how far I can, how high I can achieve in the scale if I don't look to the top of the scale? So those two things complicate our understanding of good and evil a little bit. So tonight we're going to go the other way around. Instead of coming from the bottom of the scale up, we're going to come down from the top. And what is the top? It's right there, God. God is the absolute, supreme, 100%, if you like mathematics, good. That's it. That's the absolute reference for good. Anything that is not God is no longer absolute good. So what we can understand is that there's a variations of good. If you come from the top, pure spirits are close to absolute good, but they are not absolute good. They're just close. They can get very close. And if you come down the scale, the next one down, higher order, oh, beautiful. Very, very, very good spirits. They're interested in doing good all the time, but they are not absolute. And they are not as good spirits as the pure ones are. So we come down the scale where we have a degree of purity of good. So at the top of the scale is the most possible good, not considering God. That's a whole different story. So at the top of the scale is what we consider the most percentage. Let's put in mathematical terms. Most percentage of good that we can achieve. At the bottom of the scale is the worst. And there's a degree of purity. So you go from the top to the bottom and anything in between. And what becomes interesting is if you do this exercise coming from the top, so let's say pure spirits, very, very, very good, almost 100% good all the time. And you come down, right? The next one down, higher order, you can no longer classify with the same, whatever words you use for the pure spirits. Let's just use numbers because I think it's just easier for understanding. So pure spirits, let's just say 99% good. High order spirits, which are down from the pure, cannot be 99%. They have to be less than 99%. Let's just say 95. The next one down, wise, cannot be 95% good. They have to be less than 95. So let's just say 90% good. So you come down in this percentage to a point where when the percentage is very, very, very low, you don't call good anymore. We call evil. All right? We call evil when good is the degree of purity of the good in those spirits is very low. So we call them evil spirits. They're still spirits. They're still going to be pure one day, but at the present time, at the present life they have, based on their spiritual history, their degree of purity in regards to good is very poor. So we call them evil. So you see, evil and good, they are part of the same thing. They are, we could say, they are part of the same energy. They are driving, good and evil are driving forces that we choose. I can choose one or the other. It's free will. And I'm going to get to the top of the scale being good almost 100%, faster or not, depending on my choices. So good and evil are part of the same fluidic movement. We can choose good or we can choose evil. And it's a personal choice, not transferable. Personal, not transferable. Once I make the choice, it's made. I can change my opinion later. I can make a different choice later down the road. But we cannot, we are the ones creating the idea of good and evil because of my choices. And then something very interesting comes to mind. When we rank good and evil like this, coming from the top down, where does good become evil? You see, this is very tricky. Where you come down from going back to mathematics, okay? So 99% good, 98, 97. At which number, if you will, does good become evil? Evil, so far, all that we know is evil is a low form, it's a form of low grade good. And where does, coming down the scale, good become evil? If you go to a terrorist that do massive killings and bombs and all of that, unfortunately, we know that from history of humanity. But anyway, if you go to a terrorist and ask him, do you think what you're doing is good? Do you think what you're doing is good? He might be offended by your question. He might be offended by your question because for him, what do you mean I'm not doing good? For his level of advancement, he's doing good. He's doing the best he can with the knowledge that he has. If you go back in history, 2,000 years ago, there's somebody called Saul that was doing the best he knew. And then suddenly, the best he knew said, oh, that's too low for me. I don't want to do evil anymore. I want to go up in the scale. I'm going to do good. But before he became Paul, when he was Saul doing all the, going after the Christians and everything else, he was doing the right thing at the best he could, based on the knowledge he had at the time. That's interesting. That becomes very interesting because when we look at the whole thing, when we look at the scale, each one has its own classification of good and evil. For almost everybody, everybody's good. Although some are all the way down, they are still impure spirits, and some are higher order spirits, and they think they're both good. And why is that? Because of the references. So if we look at references from the bottom of the scale, we are making more difficult for ourselves to achieve the top of the scale. I want to look up and say, this is how I can do. This is as far as I can go. I look up to Jesus and say, I want to be like him. Not, oh, I'm no longer a caveman. I'm okay with that. Mm-mm. We were created simple and ignorant, right? According to Allan Kardec in Heaven and Hell. We were created simple and ignorant, meaning with no knowledge of good and evil. But here's the trick. It doesn't mean, that's very important, at least for me. Hopefully it's for you too. It's very important that we understand that to go from the bottom to the top, I do not need to do all the evil possible in the world to, to be neutral, to then start doing a little bit of good things and then a little more, then a little more. I don't have to go through the entire scale like that. We can jump, like Saul became Paul. He jumped from the bottom of the scale. I'm not going to say bottom, bottom, but from the lower part of the scale to the top of the scale. He didn't have to do a lot more evil things when he found out, oh my God, I'm doing the wrong thing. So let me do all the evil possible to get, past the evil and start doing good. No, he didn't do that. Not even thought about that, because now that's not what needs to be done. We can jump today. It's difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. There's only a few people in the world who were able to do this in humanity. He was one of them. But it needs to be understood. We are at the best incarnation ever. We are, all of us, we are at our best incarnation ever. So we are at the best level within the scale ever. I was worse than I am. Last life, last 2 lives, last 50 lives, I was worse than what I was, than what I am. So were you. So the scale show us that the point of reference is not where I am. That would be, I can establish that the point that I am is 100% good. Wrong. Wrong. I cannot think that the reference is me. When I establish me, myself, as a reference, everything goes wrong. And there's going to be a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And by the way, pain and suffering are for those in the bottom of the scale. On the higher part of the scale, in the good spirits, the green ones that we showed you on the picture, there is no suffering, there is no pain. That's for third order spirits that use the reference as themselves. And that's a mistake. That goes against ourselves. Allan Kardec puts this on his book, Heaven and Hell, when he's discussing good and evil. Good is the supreme goal of creation. That's just beautiful. If good is the supreme goal of creation, and I place the reference on me, I just became the supreme goal of creation. And that's not true. Sorry to say that. That goes for myself too. I am not the supreme goal of creation yet. We will one day. We will. So you see, the problem in placing the reference on ourselves is that it destroys the entire knowledge. It displays everything wrong in front of our eyes. So we live, lives and situations that are not really what we should be doing. So we are almost like transferring everything into this material life and forgetting about spiritual life, which is where good and evil belong. Good and evil don't have anything to do with, what I have, the house that I have, the car that I have, the money that I make. It doesn't have anything to do with this. You're not good because you have more power or because you have more money. That's material. Good and evil are classification for moral advancement. They have nothing to do with material life. That's some of the ideas that I wanted to bring you today. Don't forget, we are at our best incarnation, but it doesn't mean that I am the reference. The reference, the best reference that we have, because we cannot comprehend God, still because, again, we are third order spirits that have a vague intuition of what God is. So we cannot really, we are not in a conscient position to use that as a reference. So the best reference that we have is Jesus. So we have an entire gospel explaining to us what he did, why he did, what he didn't do, and why he didn't do, what he suggested and recommended, and why. But you see, that's one of the beauties of Spiritism. When Jesus said what he said, he did not necessarily explain at length because, we could barely understand. So he would say, for example, at the best, he would say, "Don't kill people, don't kill." Well, he wouldn't, he would, at the most, he would say, Moses tells us don't kill, right, from the Ten Commandments. He would say, if I were you, I wouldn't kill. He's a counselor in this sense, but he would not explain why because we couldn't understand. Spiritism comes in to explain why. Now I know why I shouldn't kill. So Spiritism comes to explain the whole thing about good and evil in details. We have one entire book, Heaven and Hell, just about that. 500 pages. Out of those, maybe 300 are about are focusing on good and evil. Spirit's book, the same thing. And the gospel will tell us why do certain things, why not do other things, because why should I not do this and that? Because it's evil. Again, we cannot be the reference for this. Okay, so I appreciate your timing. Thank you, Katia, for participating with us live on this brief study here, this brief talk. And if you ever want to request a topic for us to bring into our Spiritism A Closer Look, if you want us to take a closer look at something, just go to kardekradio.com or our Facebook page. You have the information down on the screen. Just let us know. We will bring the information with you. Most of the times, we have a guest sharing ideas with us. Occasionally, I do this myself alone, like today. And just, we are all learning. Nobody is reference. Reference, the best to have is Jesus. And we need to look up, never look down. Thank you very much for participating with us today. We will be here next week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Be well, and I see you next time.